Welcome to our program, John Lough.
Thank you very much for having me.
I would like to start with the results of the US general election. Donald Trump beats Kamala Harris. Also, Republicans have gained a majority both in House and Senate. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reported about the phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. How do you see the main implications of Donald Trump's presidency for Ukraine and international world order?
Thank you, Daniel. Those, of course, are very big questions. Let me say, first of all, that Trump's victory was quite extraordinary. And it's an indication that this man has a very strong level of support in the United States, that his type of thinking appeals to a large section of the population in the US. And this is going to have major consequences for the position of the US in the world. He is going to be able to build a team with this majority in the House and in the Senate. He is going to be able to form a team that is going to pursue his radical agenda. Now, when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, to foreign policy, I think we still have to wait to see who exactly is going to be managing these issues. We have the expected nomination of Marco Rubio, Senator Rubio, as the Secretary of State. And he's somebody who is known not just as a China hawk, but has had in the past, to my knowledge, really quite strong views on the nature of the Putin regime. And equally, the nominee as the national security advisor, he is somebody, again, with I think a reasonably strong record when it comes to looking at Russia. So I think one has to be careful just about exactly where this is all going to lead. I have no doubt that Trump is going to try and do a deal quickly with Putin, or at least see whether he can do a deal. We know Trump is extremely transactional, and we should note that the Kremlin, at least, has denied that the call took place between Trump and Putin. And if I read it correctly, I took a look at this speech, the long speech that Putin gave last week at the so-called Valdai Forum. And it seemed to me that he was signaling to the US that things are going very much in my favor, in Russia's favor at the moment. I'll be pleased to hear from you when you're ready. So I wonder whether we're not going to get into a long dance and an effort to see whether Trump can align what he wants with what Putin wants. And I personally believe that's going to be actually quite difficult.
Let's cover also the position of two main candidates of Donald Trump, Marco Rubio for US Secretary of State and Mike Waltz for US National Security Advisor. How can you assess their views on Ukraine, at least if you analyzed their recent statements or previous past statements about Ukraine and the war here?
Well, I think if we look at the campaign, it's very clear that these people who feel themselves to be close to Trump or were part of the, if you like, the Make America Great Again lobby, they were very disciplined in their messaging. And they wanted to align themselves at all times with what Trump was saying. And of course, on Ukraine, he used simply a campaign slogan to attack President Biden. And let's just say, for the sake of accuracy, the record shows from Trump's first term, 2016 to 2020, that he did not give up very much to Putin at all. On the contrary, I mean, he had a conversation with him at the summit in Helsinki where nobody really knows what was said and what he might have committed to or not committed to. But when it came to Ukraine, He was the one who authorized the transfer of lethal aid, of Javelin missiles, to Ukraine. His administration also fiercely blocked the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So this doesn't feel like, much as Trump may personally admire Putin, and we hear reports that he really is in awe of the man, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's simply going to hand Putin on a plate the things that Putin would love to see, including the surrender of Ukraine. Trump can't do that. At the end of the day, he can decide whether or not to continue supporting Ukraine economically and militarily. But Ukraine has other allies, and Ukrainians themselves have to decide how this war should end. But he clearly feels that he has it within his power, at least he wants to signal that to his electorate, that he has it within his power to bring this to an end, and as he has said in the past, to stop World War III. That makes him obviously feel very powerful.
But does it mean that Donald Trump cannot let Ukraine to lose this war?
Let me come to that question. I just want to comment on Senator Rubio and his nomination as Secretary of State. I have some experience from years ago of a human, I would call it a human rights case, involving a Russian family who were being persecuted in a Latin American country. And Senator Rubio they were being persecuted by the Putin regime. Senator Rubio was an extremely effective supporter of this family's interests, and he took a very important measure that led to the family being released from prison. And I find that quite striking, that he immediately understood that these people were in danger, that they were being pursued or indeed persecuted by some people I can only describe in this case as evil. And he did his bit very quickly to ensure that those people were brought to safety. So that's I think does say something about him as a person and about his view of the Russian regime. As far as the nominee for the position of National Security Advisor goes, Waltz, I can't comment. I've only seen his statements made during the campaign. I believe he said things before the campaign that were very critical of Russia's actions in Ukraine. So one might say that these are two appointments that suggest that this is not going to be all very straightforward, and Trump is just going to get into bed with Putin and agree to his every wish. That's not going to happen. My view, and in response to your last question, is that when it comes to this negotiation that Putin will have with Trump, Trump cannot possibly show himself to be weak, because that would be interpreted in a very obvious way by the Chinese, who will be watching this negotiation extremely closely. He needs to receive from Putin in return something substantial, if it's a question of agreeing to, for example, agreeing that Ukraine should never join NATO, or agreeing that the front line should be frozen where it is now, and that Russia should receive other assurances, namely concerning demilitarization, in the sense that Ukraine shouldn't have armed forces over a certain size, all those sorts of things. So I wonder just what it is that Putin can give to Trump that is going to give him that degree of assurance that he has shown strength, that he's got a great deal for the United States and his voters. It's not at all clear to me what Putin can give him. Trump has hinted that it's not a good thing that China and Russia are now aligned. And he said it would be a good thing, in his words, to ununite them, to disunite them. Well, that's just fantasy. That's not going to happen. This relationship although there are many problems in the relationship between China and Russia, and a high degree, I believe, of mutual suspicion on both sides, they have developed in recent years, and particularly since 2022, they've developed a deeper relationship. And Trump is not going to be able to, I think, disrupt that very easily. But he might make it clear to Putin that you haven't got a choice to make here. If you really want to be aligned with the Chinese and working to support my biggest adversary, then you've got a problem coming down the line. I think that's going to be probably the way he ultimately reads this. But so far, he hasn't really connected the dots and said, I need to have X from Putin because I've got, a China problem. So I predict, Daniel, that this is going to be a very difficult negotiation. And I think it's going to take some time. And that there is no guarantee that it's going to be successful.
I would like also to cover the previous question about Donald Trump's team. What is your assessment of his candidate for U.S. Secretary of Defense? I mean, Pete Hegseth, former Fox News anchor.
It is a bizarre nomination, I think, by any standards. And I think it's caused, from what I've read, it's caused horror in the Pentagon, in NATO circles, about how you could put somebody who seems to be fighting, the culture wars, how you, with no relevant experience, how you could put them in charge of an organization so large and so important. So he's got to get through the approval process in the Senate, and that might actually prove to be quite difficult. But it's a signal of what Trump is prepared to do, I think of just how reckless he can be when it comes to some of these really important questions. So let's see who finally is appointed and what conclusions we can then draw from that. But the first sign is that Trump feels completely unrestrained, unlike he did in his first term, and that he's going to go for these kind of sensational appointments. And his nomination, equally as Attorney General, has, I think, caused simply consternation in Washington. So again, is this person going to be confirmed? I would, in that case, also be a little skeptical about how easy it will be to appoint that person to his cabinet.
And what is your assessment of Donald Trump's candidates for the head of CIA and National Intelligence Agency, for the head of this intelligence community?
Well, the head of the national intelligence again doesn't have a good record, I believe, when it comes to Ukraine, or has made statements in the past that don't appear to be supportive of Ukraine. And I just simply don't have information on the CIA nomination, so I can't comment on that particular appointment. Apologies. I've just been traveling for a few days and I haven't been able to follow this in the degree of detail that I perhaps normally would, but I have read most of the media reports.
And I would like also to focus our attention on possible negotiations between Ukraine and Russia and the United States. According to Fox News, Donald Trump could appoint U.S. Special Representative on the negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. Do you really believe that Donald Trump can reach any kind of deal with Putin? And can he really be tough on Russian dictator Putin? Can he put more pressure on Vladimir Putin and force him to any kind of concessions to Ukraine to reach a normal, appropriate deal in good faith?
Well, let's comment first on the special representative. In the past, there was during Trump's first term, there was the former U.S. ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, who is very respected in Ukraine for his commitment to the country, for his very clear thinking about Ukraine's interests and how best to support them. So I have no idea who is in the running for this position. But if it is somebody of Kurt Volker's caliber and competence and with strong views about how to support Ukraine, then that would obviously be a very, very positive outcome. In terms of the negotiation itself, then, as I said before, I think Trump needs to show that he has been strong, and just ending the war on Putin's terms and forcing Ukraine to surrender would not give Trump what he needs, not at all. So I don't know whether he's expecting Putin to fear him in some way, that he really could say, because he's so volatile, he could say, look, if you don't agree to this, you know what, I'm going to actually support Ukraine, and I'm going to give Ukraine more than Biden did. Biden was weak on Ukraine. I think the Russians are actually a little uncomfortable with Trump because they can't read him better than anybody else. Now, the people regularly ask, do the Russians have some sort of compromat on Trump? I have no idea, but I suspect that if they did, then we would have seen more evidence of it during the first term. During Trump's first term, he turned out for the Russian side to be a disappointment. So this time round, let's see. But I say again, I think to achieve a deal of the kind that Trump has in mind, that makes him look like the really powerful leader who can send a strong signal both to Beijing and to Tehran. It's going to take a long and difficult negotiation. And at that point, he's going to really find out whether Putin wants to seriously stop this war or not. Because I am of the view that Putin actually needs this war in order to justify the type of measures he's taken in Russia internally, this degree of repression. He needs to try and keep the Russian system cohesive. And you do that by saying, well, we're fighting a war here. The moment that peace breaks out, I think he's going to have some problems, not least because he would have a lot of people demobilized in society, a lot of people who suddenly come to earn considerable amounts of money fighting during this war, who would suddenly find themselves without that type of income. And you also have branches of industry in Russia that are now heavily supporting the arms industry, obviously military factories themselves, but there are suppliers, and that whole military industry system is obviously benefiting hugely at the moment. And then suddenly there's no longer the justification for spending money on that scale and putting it in that direction. So you create a new set of possibly losers in the Russian system itself. So my general view is that for Putin to bring this war to an end, he's got to show that he's won, but he can't do that if Trump at the same time has to demonstrate victory. So I think that's the dynamic that we are looking at.
What would it take for Donald Trump to force Vladimir Putin to negotiate in good faith? Does he have enough leverage on Russia to force Putin to do something, to negotiate with Ukraine?
Well, I think the leverage he has is that I don't want to spend money on this thing, but if you're going to really make me do it, I will. Because we're talking about the credibility of the United States here. Now, Trump, boasts that during his time in office, no wars started. He very much sees himself as this strong man. But let's remember that he was the one who took the decision to withdraw the United States from Afghanistan. And this was a humiliating withdrawal for Western countries, for NATO. And I believe it was, in fact, one thing that emboldened Putin and made him believe that the US was now weak, that its alliances were not as strong as they used to be, And now is, in fact, the moment to push forward on his Ukraine agenda, which had never gone away after the annexation of Crimea. It was just on a sort of slow burn. And those two events are connected, the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan and then the full-scale invasion. So I don't think Trump wants to be held responsible for another humiliation of the United States. He managed to, in the case of Afghanistan, ensure that President Biden was held responsible. So he's got an incentive. Now, whether he really understands just how all these things are connected, and in particular the fact that the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, and others are going to be looking closely at his actions and drawing conclusions from them, he's got to weigh up how he talks to Putin. And being somebody who's very transactional, he will have an idea of what he wants, and he'll also have an idea of how to incentivize Putin. The trouble is that Putin has his own ideas, and at the same time, I think he's very skilled at manipulating Trump. And I think that's signaling that we had from the conference last week, where Putin spoke at length, where he seemed to be trying to say to Trump, "I'm very impressed by you as a person, the way that you, after the assassination attempt, you got up on your feet and you showed great strength." He was definitely playing to Trump's ego. So I imagine that Putin and his advisors have put a lot of effort into trying to work out which buttons to press in order to encourage a certain response from Trump. So they know what they're doing, but like everybody else, I don't think they can read Trump 100%. They can look at his instincts. They can think about how to flatter him, how to get him to a point where he gives something away. But why was it not possible during the first term to get more from him? I don't think we have an adequate answer to that, even though we know from US sources that Trump was fascinated by Putin, somewhat overawed by him, and probably still thinks that Putin is an extremely impressive leader, not least for the fact that he has been in office for so long.
Thank you, John, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.